that are going to be kind of what Jackson is known for. And this is going to be kind of one of the very first ones that's going to be really popular for him. Now, in terms of things that you need to know for the quiz or the exam for Andrew Jackson, I would put number 1 that you need to know is going to be the spoil system. So number 1 is the spoil system. I would suggest writing that down on your paper. And then we're going to go into the next one right now. Now, when we talk about Native American relationships, okay, and I know that we kind of started this one, but then we got cut really short. So in the 5 civilized tribes, there's one tribe in particular that we're going to focus on. Do you guys remember which tribe it is?
Cherokee.
Cherokee, exactly. Now, the Cherokee, remember, are going to be an extremely civilized nation. Remember, they're going to have their own written language that contributes to their interpretation of the Bible. Remember, they have their own newspaper that's going to be half in English, half in Cherokee. So they're considered one of the really civilized tribes during this time. Now, the thing is, though, is that Andrew Jackson, is going to have pressure. You see, he had promised that he was going to fix the Native American problem after he was elected. The governor of Georgia, is going to say, I want these Native Americans out, and it's your job to be able to fix them. Andrew Jackson says, yes, I will fix them through the expulsion of these native tribes from the state of Georgia. And this is going to be what's called the Indian Removal Act, which is going to be the number 2 thing that you need to know about Andrew Jackson, and that is going to be a starred term. Now, what you need to star on this is going to be your very first bullet on the remove and resettle Eastern Native Americans. And then if you will highlight on the second to last bullet, directly led to the Trail of Tears. So basically what this act said is this. All of the native tribes that are going to be in Georgia are now expelled. All the civilized tribes throughout the area are going to be expelled and put into a state called Oklahoma. And if you will write next to the Indian Removal Act, if you will write down Oklahoma, this will help you remember the Indian Removal Act. Now, what's going to happen is all these civilized tribes are going to be moved into the state of Oklahoma. The problem is that these Cherokees say, this is not fair to us, this is against the law. Well, what happens is why would Andrew Jackson do this? Well, we can see, here's some quotes from Andrew Jackson. So it says, the removal of the Indians would be an act of seeming violence, but it will prove in the end an act of enlarged philanthropy. What does the word philanthropy mean?
Charity.
It's like a charity, yeah. So it seems like it's violence, but it's actually charitable to remove them. And why is that? These untutored sons of the forest. How is he describing Native Americans?
Childish.
Savage, childish, basically people who can't care for themselves, cannot exist in a state of independence in the vicinity of the white man. Basically, these natives cannot survive in the vicinity of the white man, so what is Jackson's solution to help them survive? Kick them out. Okay? So in order to save them from the white man, we're going to kick them out of their homelands. Here's another one as well. This is what he says. He says, I feel conscious of having done my duty to my red children. Okay? Obviously, we have this nice little sense of racism here. And in any failure of my good intention arises, it will be attributable to their want of duty to themselves, not to me. If anything bad happens, it's their own fault. It is not on me. Now, with Andrew Jackson, basically, they're going to say, I thought this was illegal, and they're going to challenge this in court. The Cherokee Nation is going to sue the federal government, saying the Indian Removal Act is against the U.S. Constitution. And guess what? Supreme Court agrees. Supreme Court says, yes, this was unconstitutional. They are their own independent nation. You can't kick them off of their land. They side with the Cherokees. What do you think Andrew Jackson is going to do to that? He doesn't veto it. He literally just ignores it. He actually says this. This is a quote from what he said at dinner one time. He said, John Marshall, who's going to be the Supreme Court Justice, has made this decision. Now let him enforce it. Basically, you've made this decision. Now actually show me you can enforce it. Supreme Court says he breaks the law. Andrew Jackson's going to go and break the law and going to do it anyways. He doesn't care what the U.S. Supreme Court says. And this begins what is known as the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears is a starred term. And basically what the Trail of Tears is going to do is this is going to be, and if you will highlight, forced march of the Cherokee Nation And then if you circle like the word thousands died, okay, basically what's going to happen is these Native Americans are going to be forced from their land and moved into the West. Now, how they're going to do this is they're not going to exactly plan this conveniently. They're actually going to say that they're going to start this trek in about November and December. This is in the middle of winter, and they have about a 2,100-mile walk that they're going to have to walk from Georgia into Oklahoma. There's no railroads, there's no cars. You are going to walk for the next 3 months. During this time, thousands are going to die. This is a chart of approximately people who are going to die. If you compare the Cherokee, 20,000 members are going to be moved. Approximately up to 8,000 of them are going to die along this trail. Oftentimes you were fed bread and soup. You were expected to have that to survive. Doesn't work too well when you're walking 2,100 miles. Now, in terms of the impact of this is also going to begin our lessening of native tribal lands. If you see right here, everything in black, this is starting in 1850, this is all going to be native tribal land. By the time that's happened now in 1990, what has happened to the U.S. tribal lands? Almost all gone. And basically what this is going to cause a massive decrease in the availability of tribal land. And it's going to cause them to be able to lose that and put it on reservations, although the reservation system is going to come just a little bit later. Anybody have questions on the Trail of Tears before we continue? Okay. Which brings us to the Second Bank of the United States. Now, the Second Bank of the United States, remember we've had this before. This was going to be an Alexander Hamilton kind of a belief. What's going to happen is, if you will highlight, after War of 1812. Basically what's going to happen is, following the War of 1812, America's going to institute a new national bank in order to stabilize the economy. The economy booms, the national bank is a complete success, and then comes Andrew Jackson in 1828. You see, Andrew Jackson, remember, he's a Democrat. He does not believe in this national bank. He does not believe in Henry Clay. He wants to get rid of it. Now, if you will star the second bullet, here's basically what he's going to say. The national bank is unconstitutional. There is nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says you can do this, and we are going to get rid of it. So, this begins this bitter feud. Now, if you remember in the election of 1832, you got Andrew Jackson over here, and who's this guy?
Henry Clay.
Henry Clay, right? The greatest president who never was. Okay? Now, with these two, remember, do they like each other?
Not really.
No, especially Andrew Jackson. He's like his bitter rival. Now, what's going to happen is that Henry Clay is going to advocate for this national bank. And what's going to happen is the head of the national bank is going to be made as this guy, Nicholas Biddle. Nicholas Biddle is going to be head of the national bank, but here's the problem. Andrew Jackson hates Nicholas Biddle because Nicholas Biddle is basically just another Henry Clay. So what's going to happen? Now, these two are going to work together and build an extremely successful bank. If you want to write next to the Second Bank of the United States, if you want to write next to it Biddle, B-I-D-D-Le, and if you want to equal success, basically Biddle makes this extremely successful and a profitable bank. But obviously Andrew Jackson can't have this national bank. Now what's going to happen is, during a dinner party one time, Andrew Jackson and Van Buren, who's vice president, are going to meet together about the national bank. Andrew Jackson, during this dinner party, is going to say this: "The bank, Mr. Van Buren, is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. Basically, I'm going to get rid of the national bank in any way that I can, and here's how he does it." Now, this is going to start Biddle and Jackson into a bitter fight over the national bank. How is he going to kill it? So you can see right here, Biddle's in the center. This is the snake of the national bank, and he is going to, as Andrew Jackson, is going to slay it. But how can you slay something that cannot be destroyed? For example, this is like the U.S. Supreme Court. Donald Trump can't just make a paper that signs it away and says the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't exist anymore. You can't just eliminate something. So Andrew Jackson has to figure out a way to eliminate the national bank without actually eliminating the national bank. How can you destroy something that you can't actually get rid of? Now, here's basically what's going to happen. He has this guy named Roger B. Taney. Taney, he attempts to put into the Secretary of the Treasury. The Senate is going, or the Congress is going to deny him the seat of the Senate, but he's going to put him in a position that he can control the national money. So here's what's going to happen. Basically, it's kind of like a bank, okay? Now, I want you to pretend that all of you guys have a job, okay? Every month you get $500 and you put it into a bank, okay? So So $500, bank, whatever. And you have your little debit card, and you go and spend money, right? Swipe, swipe, swipe. You have a bunch of money in there, so it's always going to get approved. Well, what's going to happen is that this is the same thing with National Bank. We're putting money into the National Bank, which is going to be the majority of the nation's wealth, and we keep spending money. But if we put money in, we spend money out, it's all going to be fine. Jackson, he can't shut down the bank. So instead, he begins to deposit his money into another person's bank. Imagine in our real life scenario, if you go to U.S. Bank and you've been depositing, imagine if you now take your money and put it into like a Chase Bank. Okay? But you still are swiping the card of U.S. Bank. What's eventually going to happen to all the money in that U.S. Bank account? It's going to be gone. And your card's a decline, right? So that's what's going to happen here. Eventually, we move our money to another bank. The money in the current bank that we have, the National Bank, we're going to run out of it. There's no more money left in the bank, and the bank is going to decline, and it's going to die. Okay? So basically, he cheats the system in order to get rid of it. Now, Roger B. Taney is actually an interesting story. Again, he got denied as the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. This is going to, with Taney as well as Jackson, it's going to destroy the National Bank, which you can see right here. This is the National Bank falling due to Andrew Jackson. Now, this unfortunately is going to put America into a complete national panic and depression. But then what's going to happen is, if you want to kind of hear an interesting end to the story, in order to get back at the U.S. government for not allowing Roger B. Taney as the Secretary of Treasury, he makes him the U.S. Supreme Court Justice. And if you don't know, that's a really powerful position. And unfortunately, in about 5 years, he's going to make a decision that's going to change the course of American history and basically lead directly to the Civil War. But we'll talk about that later. So remember him. Think old guy who looks like a corpse. We will come back to him. Okay? All right, now this is what is called the Bank War. So this is going to be your number 3 item to know about Andrew Jackson. Number 3 is going to be the Bank War. And then we're going to head to our very last one. Now, on your paper, you should have last class received a little slip of paper that has the Nullification Crisis on it. Okay? That's what you need to be looking at right now, is your little slip of paper with the Nullification Crisis. You should have, in theory, stapled it to your paper. Okay? So, let's go through the Nullification Crisis. Now, here's basically what's going to happen. Okay? Andrew Jackson is going to be the U.S. president. This guy, John C. Calhoun, who basically looks like he's been electrocuted. And also, if you want to look at a fun fact, this is his beard. It's right down here.
Oh, heck, dude.
Yeah. It was a pretty great, attractive look back in the old days. Now, what? Yeah, that's like his actual facial hair. It's John C. Calhoun. He's not weird. Although, if you go into the South, you have a lot of people who think that he's the greatest man who ever lived. Mostly because of the Civil War. Now, what happens is John C. Calhoun is a representative from the state of South Carolina. Now, as the representative of the South Carolina, though, there's going to be a problem. You see, this thing is going to get passed called the Tariff of Abominations. If you want to write next or highlight the Nullification Crisis and highlight the word tariff in the very first bullet, this Tariff of Abominations is going to be passed. Now, we've talked about this before. The tariff is going to, in theory, increase American economies by protecting American trade. This extremely helps the North. The North skyrockets into the economy, extremely rapidly successful. But unfortunately, the South, this prevents England from trading with the South. What does that mean? If you can't trade with the South, Southern economy is going to plummet. So while the Northern economy skyrockets, the Southern economy plummets. So what's going to happen? John C. Calhoun decides on this thing called nullification. And I will tell you that the Nullification Crisis is going to be huge because it makes a huge impact on the rest of America. Here's basically what he says. Every state signed the U.S. Constitution. Because they signed the U.S. Constitution, you therefore have a right to nullify or reject a law that the federal government passes. Now, let me give you an example. Imagine with a couple years ago we had our gay marriage law come into play. Imagine if Utah came out and said, you know what, we don't agree with it, so that doesn't exist in the state of Utah. Do you see why that might be a problem? Would any states really follow the federal government if they agreed with them? No. Not really, exactly. So what is they going to do? So Andrew Jackson is chatting with John C. Calhoun at a dinner party, and he says this: "Our union, it must be preserved. We must stay together as a one nation." John C. Calhoun raises his glass and says, "The union next to our liberty, the most dear, may we always remember that it can only be preserved by respecting the rights of the states." Okay? John C. Calhoun says, "You must respect the South. This is going to split them up." And then what's going to happen is John C. Calhoun is going to say that South Carolina is going to secede and become its own nation. So South Carolina becomes its own nation, or at least that's what they say. In response to that, Andrew Jackson is going to send about 10,000 troops down to South Carolina. It's on the brink of civil war, and then who comes along?
Abraham Lincoln. Henry Clay.
Not Abraham Lincoln, but Henry Clay, the great compromiser.
Where's Abraham Lincoln at this time?
Actually, fun fact, pause that, because your question will be answered in a little bit. Okay? So what's going to happen? Henry Clay is going to come along. He creates a brand new tariff that's going to help both the North and the South, and it prevents the Southern United States from seceding. Now, in terms of Andrew Jackson as a person, okay, we've learned a lot about Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's on your $20 bill. About 2 years ago, there was a huge upswing in why aren't there any women on money bills in the United States? In fact, if you don't know, 2020 is going to be the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, as in the women's right to vote. Because of that, there was a bill that was enacted during the Obama era that says that now they're going to replace a $20 bill with somebody with a woman. They voted, and it came out to be Harriet Tubman as the winner. So, in theory, the 20th bill would have Harriet Tubman. However, current administrative policies have reversed this and said it was too much money. So right now, this is not going to happen because it's been put on pause. So we don't know if this is actually going to happen. It was passed into law, but we'll see what's going to happen in the future. Okay, anything about Andrew Jackson that you guys need? Yes?
Why would it be too much money?
Because the idea would be that it would be too difficult to change like the format of the bill, and you would have to print a new picture on the bill. The bill would only be in for 1 year, so it would be a limited edition, similar to like the Sacagawea dollars, which would mean you'd have to train people that these are real. It just was seen as too much of a financial burden on the United States. Okay, yes?
Why is Andrew Jackson on the bill?
Great question. Andrew Jackson, which I actually think he would have hated to be on the bill because he hated everything to do with banks and money. Why is Andrew Jackson on it? Well, if you think about it, the majority of the people on our money, except for Benjamin Franklin, are going to be some of our biggest presidents that are going to be well known for the first 80 years of history. Andrew Jackson was well known. A lot of people like Andrew Jackson. A lot of people see him as a guy that wasn't going to let the government tear him down. He was going to make his own path. A lot of people support Andrew Jackson.
And look at his hair.
And his hair, yeah. Some people place Andrew Jackson as one of the highest-ranking presidents in United States history. Others put him as one of the lowest. Depends on who you ask. All right, so we're going to move on. If you will grab out your Reformers packet and your notes that you picked up today. You'll need the supplemental notes as well as your packet at the same time. Now, I know it's really rough on days that we do a ton of notes, and I apologize. We can't do simulations every day, or else we never get to the AP exam. And I know some of you are like really, really, really sleepy today, and have been like falling asleep a ton, and I'm excited for you to wake up, okay? Because what I can tell you is that yesterday, for the first time this year, Miss Ray got really snippy at a certain class, because like 15 people fell asleep. So I just want to really emphasize the need to stay awake. And I know it's hard on days to lecture, but if it helps, I know some of your other AP teachers, and I know they lecture 100% of the time. So I know it's not just me sometimes. Okay? In fact, the teacher before me who I took this job from told me that I need to lecture every single day for 82 minutes without a PowerPoint. So, and you guys all take your own notes on Stanford notes or whatever they're called. Yep, Kellner notes. I don't know why I couldn't think of it.
Stanford is better.
Yes. Okay, anyways, what? Anybody? Okay. So, here's what you need. Basically, if you notice, on your packet that has all of these different blanks that say define. The other class was able to complete these, but unfortunately you guys are behind. So instead, on this supplemental notes, I went ahead and printed them all for you. Okay? So you'll need to go through both because we're going to go through what you need to know most for the AP exam on these notes. I've had a lot of students say, how am I supposed to know what to study for on the quiz? There's all these people. How do I know what's the most important? This is where you find out what's the most important. Okay? So I'm going to go through, so make sure you have both of these ready to go so we can go over them. Okay? So the first word that you need to star is going to be the word antebellum. Antebellum. Now, antebellum, the reason you need to know this word is because this word might come up on the AP exam. And it's not that they're trying to trick you, but it sometimes trips people up. Antebellum is quite literally the pre-war period. If you want to put next to antebellum, just put the word period 4. And then the date range is 1800 to 1848. That's all that word means. It means before the Civil War. That's all that word means. So don't be scared of it. The next term that you need to know is going to be the Second Great Awakening. This is also a starred term. Things that you need to highlight on the Second Great Awakening is if you will highlight religious revival, and if you highlight the word churches. Basically, the Second Great Awakening, just as the First Great Awakening, is going to be the major religious revival in the United States. This is going to be where there's going to be a massive increase of churches going on in the United States. A couple of the ones that you need to know. So if you look at your packet really quickly, these are some people that are on your paper. I put down the most important things that you need to know about them. If you don't have these on your paper, you need to write them into your packet. Or if you also don't know, or if you don't have this at all, or if you do have it, you can highlight it, something like that. You need to make sure you know for Charles Finney the words burned over district. Basically, he was a preacher that went to New York. Now, New York was a burned over district, and if you are LDS, you might have heard of this term before because it's common in your religion. Basically, what happened at the burned over district is in New York, there were so many churches. A single city of maybe 1,000 people could have 85 churches in that one city. People didn't understand where to go. Every single church they went to said they were the true church. How am I supposed to say everything is true when all these other people are saying it's true? Because of this, people were so burnt out from religion that they just stopped going. So he goes and he says, no, you need to reverse your decision. You need to upswing back into religion, and it causes the start of the religious movement in New York and throughout the United States. Utopian communities, you need to star. And you need to highlight perfect communities. And if you will also underline the names of the ones in this bullet, so there's Shakers and New Oneida and New Harmony. So let me basically explain what's going to happen with these utopian communities. These are going to be perfect societies. They want basically an exclusive community far away from everybody else that is going to be perfect. These can either be religious or they could be economic. Now, in terms of the modern day, we still have utopian communities. A lot of these utopian communities, though, can either be like good ones, which are going to be exclusive communities that are going to kind of live their own lives, everything's legal, things like that. Oftentimes, the ones in the news, though, are going to be the bad ones, the ones that are doing illegal things. For example, in the 1990s, there was this community in Africa, called Jonestown. What basically happened at that location is there was a large group of religious people in America. They moved to Africa believing that doomsday was about to occur. They ended up committing mass suicide of about 700 people. Now, in another example, we had one recently, about 6 months ago. There was a community in Arizona that believed that it was their responsibility to get rid of anybody who was anti-Islam in America. Their solution to that was they built up a community that was a training school to commit school shootings. They trained kids starting at 3 years old up to adults to shoot AR-15s and commit mass shootings around the United States. Luckily, that community was caught before anything bad happened, and those people are now in jail. Now, yeah.
So were they anti-Islam or they were anti-Islam?
No, they were extremist Islam that they believed that.
So they were Islamic?
Yes. They were Islamic, and they believed that all Americans, everybody living in America, was anti-Islam, and they needed to be eliminated.
Got it.
Yeah. And obviously that is like not traditional Islam as well. That's an extremist group. Okay. Now, in terms of examples during this time, we'll start with my personal favorite, who are the Shakers. Whoa. I don't know what happened. Okay. It's going to be the Shakers. Now, the Shakers are super fun. Basically, what they believed in is their form of worship was through shaking, aka dancing. Now, basically what they would do is they would have 18 to 24-hour dance parties. The longest one they had was about 72 hours of constant dance. You were not allowed to sleep, you danced. Yeah, it's a pretty fun party. Except for the dancing is probably not what you recognize. You can actually see one of the forms of dancing right here, which is called the chicken dance. Now, this dancing that was going on, basically it was a form to connect to God. Sometimes this dancing was so intense, though, that it actually would destroy the buildings that they were in. Whether it be that they were dancing so intense, they would like bang against the walls and the walls would fall down. They literally raised the roof, yes. Unfortunately, though, the Shakers did have one extremely fatal flaw, and that's that they did not believe in procreation. If you don't know about religion, part of the reason why religions are able to survive is you have children. Those children get into your religion upon birth. They continue. Their children are in that religion. If you don't believe in procreation, you literally die out because the religion dies with you when you die. And they are going to actually go out in about 30 years. However, if you go to Albany, New York, that is the original Shaker community. It's actually a National Historical Site. You can go there and you can see that there are 2 remaining Shakers. And that's it.
They tried really hard.
Yeah, what?
So they tried really hard.
Yeah, the Shakers kind of failed. Another example of a perfect community of religion. Oh, by the way, this is a joke, so you can read the joke. It's really funny.
Oh my, so mad.
It's funny because it's the Shakers.
Let's shake it off. What are they shaking off?
Sure, sin. Okay? Alright, now, the next community is going to be the Oneida. Now, this is going to be why people were so concerned about utopian communities. Utopian communities oftentimes did not do like the fun shaking, things like that. They would believe in basically, again, you're trying to get rid of complete sin and become your own perfect religious person. These communities have to become so religious that they begin to break, bend, or literally break the law. In this situation of the Oneida community, and again, we're going to be super mature when we talk about this, so just be mature. Okay? The Oneida community believed in something called complex marriages in order to be saved. The idea of complex marriages basically meant that upon birth and until death, you were married to anybody and everybody in your community. There was unlimited spouses. There didn't mind gender. It did not mind if that person was your parent or your sibling. You were married to everybody and your job was to procreate. Now, obviously, some people had issues with this, aka everybody around the community. And so a lot of these people ended up getting arrested, which basically killed the environment of the Oneida community. Now, the last one I want to tell you about is the New Harmony. And if on your paper you do not have socialism, you need to write down the word socialism on your charts. Okay? Now, the New Harmony community is going to be an economic community. Basically, their goal is to have perfect socialism. What that means, everybody there has the same job, which is working in factories that you can see right here. You work in the factory, everybody receives the same pay. Everybody pulls all the food together. Everything gets divvied out. It's on the first page. 4th one down. Okay? So what's going to happen, though, is that in socialism, there's never truly a true socialism because true socialism tends to breed corruption because nobody likes it when everybody is the same, as in people still want to compete and get the most. So unfortunately, this is going to lead to several strife. People are controversial about it, and it ends up going away. Now, this is going to be one that's going to be on your supplemental notes, your pumpkin notes. Under Joseph Smith, what you need to know for Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, you need to highlight most successful church from the Second Great Awakening. And you need to circle the word polygamy. Now, with the Joseph Smith. So Joseph Smith is going to be a guy in the burned out district in New York. He has the same exact problem as Charles Finney saw, where all these people were confused about different religions. He received a revelation from God. He then formed a new religion. And this new religion is going to be very controversial. They get moved around persecution to persecution. Why Brigham Young is going to be included in this is a couple of reasons. If you receive a sourcing of Joseph Smith, it's probably going to be a Second Great Awakening quote. If you receive one on Brigham Young, it could be one of two things. One, Joseph Smith dies before they move to their Utopian community. The LDS Church did actually have a Utopian community here in Utah. Anybody know what it's called? It's the name of the original name of Utah?
Deseret.
State of Deseret. So the State of Deseret is actually a Utopian community. It's a community where they attempted to be a perfect religious society, separated away from persecution. Brigham Young, though, was the one who brought them there because Joseph Smith at this point is dead. The other sourcing that you might get in terms of controversy is going to be the Polygamy Controversy. Basically, this church believed in polygamy of expanding that church. Brigham Young in particular had several hundred wives. In terms of the controversy of this, is in the late 1800s, polygamy gets banned in the United States. Because of this, or because the religion did it first, whatever you believe in, is that they're going to ban polygamy in this church. However, and this is where it gets into a really interesting split, if you have ever heard of two churches, one is called the FLDS Church, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, or you've ever heard of the RLDS Church, which is the Reformed Latter-day Saints, which is now called the Community of Christ. They'll split over this Brigham Young issue. Basically what happens is when polygamy goes away, Brigham Young's about to die. As soon as he dies, they create their own religion that says that Joseph Smith was never a prophet. Brigham Young, however, is the founder and the prophet of their religion. They go off of Brigham Young's belief in polygamy. And so they actually have very similar things that the other one does. Like they have temples. They read the Book of Mormon. However, they also practice polygamy. Now, as a quick little side note, just so that you guys are aware, FLDS is still an extremely popular religion throughout the United States, especially in Utah. I've had several students that have been from FLDS families who are from families of polygamous families. I think there's a little bit of a stigma. I already had people yesterday kind of make a couple of comments. We don't know what the environment of our classroom is. We could have people in here that are from polygamous families. The one thing I would like to say about this is, number one, polygamy is technically illegal. While polygamy is the actual marriage, you can't marry more than one person. There's also this thing called cohabitation, which is how they're able to charge these people with crimes, which means all these families living together under one roof. There's only one state in the United States that allows cohabitation. Does anybody know what it is?
Florida.
No.
Arizona.
No. No, it's definitely not Utah.
Colorado.
Okay, I'm just going to tell you. It's Arizona. Or not Arizona, sorry, Nevada. Because I have something else for Arizona. Nevada is the only state that allows cohabitation. If you guys have ever heard of the show called Sister Wives, there's a reason they moved to Arizona, is they moved to Arizona with the intention of being able to cohabitate.
You mean Nevada?
Nevada. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to focus on Arizona because he said it first.
Come on, John.
Okay, yeah, come on. So, okay, anyways, so one thing is, though, that this family has attempted to change those laws. They sued the state of Utah over their polygamy laws, and it went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied doing it, so it is still considered illegal in the state. The one thing I will tell you is I think the major controversy from polygamy comes from the extremist part of it, which is the FLDS group that is the extremist group. If you've heard of Jeff Warren's, or you've heard of the polygamist group that believes in child marriage and things like that, those are the ones that kind of give this a really bad name. They do actually have a Utopian community. It's down south. It's on the border of Arizona, and this one's real Arizona, and Utah. Is that in this community, 98% of the community is FLDS, and they drive you out if you're not. There's stories of families that have moved down there, and the utility companies shut off their electricity, water, and heat until they get driven out. The kids go to school, and if you're not a member of the church, the teachers refuse to speak to you. The police force became so corrupt that eventually somebody sued. It went up to the federal government, and that city is no longer allowed to govern itself. It can't have a police force. It can't have a government. It's actually run by the federal government and an outside policing agency because of the corruption. So Utopian communities definitely still exist here in Utah. Okay. All right, Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism, if you will star this term. And then if you will highlight religious study on personal experiences and beliefs. Basically, what Transcendentalism means is that people before would go to church, be told by a preacher or a pastor, whatever it could be, that they received revelation and this is what should happen. You were being told by somebody else what to do. He says that religion is more than that. If you're in a religion, you should be able to believe in your own religion. You should be able to receive revelation, come up with your own thoughts and ideas. This is letting you be an individual in your own religion. Now, a couple of the people have some examples. Is things like Ralph Waldo Emerson believed in the idea of hope, as in you should be able to have hope and desire and personal revelation. Henry David Thoreau emphasized real-life experiences. He believed that you should be able to experience religion on a real-life level. And then we're going to go to abolition. Now, abolition you should already be aware of, that you need to be able to know. However, the two major figures of abolition that are on this paper, who are going to be William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, you need to star those people. Star William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass. So what you need to know for William Lloyd Garrison is if you will highlight on your paper or write the American Anti-Slavery Society, and if you will also highlight the Liberator, or write it if you don't have it. My person has it, so I'm going to assume at least half of you have it. Now, basically what he does is he is going to be against slavery, and he's going to make this known through a newspaper. Now, what makes a big difference for him is what race is he? He's white. So now you have white people saying that we should not have slavery. That's a huge, huge deal. Now it's not the minority saying they need rights. It's now other people saying they need rights as well. The other person you need to star is going to be Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, you need to make sure that you have down the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, by the way, we are going to, hey, here's a book. And it's the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass.
Look at Stephen doing his English.
Is it for English?
Yeah, we're reading.
Look at you guys reading your English stuff or getting the Spark Notes. Good job. Okay. Now, then, I guess the book I read seemed a lot bigger. It was really thick. It must have been big print. Anyways, Frederick Douglass is going to make a major impact, especially after the American Civil War. But just know his name. One problem is why he wasn't successful prior is because he is black. It's very hard for him to be able to get a lot of his statements known out there. Okay, now suffrage, the right to vote. If you will highlight the right to vote. Now, here's a really good news, and if you want to write it on your piece of paper, here's some great news about this one. If you want to write down, study for next test, period 5. We go off of your textbook, and while these were antebellum reformers, your textbook puts them into the next period, so you do not have to study this paper for your test. So you can ignore this paper for your test. You do not need to study it. Okay? So go ahead and move on to the last page. Almost done. Now we're going to go into Romanticism next. Romanticism, if you will go ahead and highlight unrealistic or fantasy. Basically what's going to happen is this is going to be an unrealistic interpretation of the world. For example, and this is a starred term, the Hudson River School. So again, if you will star Hudson River School. Basically what happens with the Hudson River School is that they're going to portray America as this beautiful, majestic place. The picture on the right is supposed to depict New York City. Now, obviously you say, that doesn't look like New York City. Well, the reason why is because these are unreal and fantasy. This is the perfect America, at least what he sees as the perfect America. Hudson River School is a movement of creating art that shows how beautiful America truly is. Now, Horace Mann is a guy that you need to star. Horace Mann is going to be free public education. What happens basically is he's going to allow girls between 1st and 3rd grade to go to school basically until they can read and write. And then boys, they're allowed to go to school until 6th grade. But it's all free, so now education is not for the rich. The last person is Dorothea Dix. You need to star her, and she is very, very important. They talk about her a ton on the AP exam. Dorothea Dix is going to be prison reform. Now, prior to this time, she is going to go undercover at a mental hospital. While she's at this mental hospital, she discovers that these insane asylum inmates are going to be treated awfully. They're going to be beat, kicked, killed. These people live on dirt floors. They're eaten by rats. And she's going to write this book, and it's going to encourage prison reform throughout the United States. She's one of the most impactful reformers that we have. Completely changes our prison system to what it is today. All right, so we can go ahead and move on from this, and now we're going to move on to our Mexican-American War notes. And I know that we are just like screaming through this. Oh, wait. I forgot one more thing. One more thing on this paper, on your supplemental notes, is the word temperance. If you will highlight, get rid of alcohol consumption. Get rid of alcohol consumption. We'll talk about temperance a lot later, but basically there was a movement to get rid of alcohol in the United States. If you don't know, we do end up banning alcohol. It was one of the worst failures in American history. And we will talk about that because we ban alcohol, and then alcoholism massively skyrockets. A bunch of people die. We have mobsters and gangsters. It creates the modern day like mobs and gangs. It's awesome. We'll talk about it. All right, so at this point, we're on our final notes for the day. Now, due to time constraints, because we have approximately 25 minutes to get through this entire paper, we are going to skip a couple of things that will not be on your quiz. They will be on the test, but what we will do is following your quiz next class, we'll talk for like 7 minutes, and then we'll have story time. Okay? So we're going to cover the other things next class period, and then we'll have a good story. Okay? So, the things that you can skip, and if you want to maybe make a note on what to study for your quiz, is we're going to begin on Manifest Destiny. In a second. So this is the one that we're going to start with. So if you maybe want to draw a line, that is where we are going to start for the quiz. Okay? The other parts we're going to talk about later because they're really short, but we're just not going to be able to get to them. Now, Manifest Destiny is a double/triple star term. It is extremely important, and we're going to talk about it for the next 3 periods in American history. What I want you to do is I want you to take this paper, and I want you to flip it over. And at the bottom of this paper, okay, so we're on this paper.
Okay. I get you.
Yeah, so that's what we were talking about earlier. So the problem is that the printer's broken.
Okay.
So I can't print you out another one. Because I don't know what happened. I print 15 extra every day, and I don't know what happened, but apparently people decided to take more than one. So, do you want to maybe squeeze next to Alex and then watch Alex and what she does, and then just kind of write it down? And I'll do my best to print some more off, but again, apparently people really like these notes because they took a ton of extra. If anybody picked up notes today, by the way, and you already had them, or you already went and got them and you had them, please get them back. I only make enough notes for everybody to have some plus 15. There's no reason we should have ran out of notes today, so I don't know what the heck happened, but yeah, I'm really sorry. I will try to get that. It'll be on Canvas, though, I promise. I would print you one off, but the printer broke. Third period.
Canvas? Are they on,
If you go to modules, and you go down to Unit 2, and then you go down to the day, it'll be on there. Okay. All right, so on your piece of paper, if you will look at the very, very bottom of your paper, there are 2 quotes at the bottom of this paper. What I want you to do is I want you to read over this and try to define for me what is manifest destiny. Well, so you write it down. So write it down next to the quotes. at the bottom of your paper, there are two quotes that describe manifest destiny. So go ahead and write that down of what you think it means. All right, so who can tell me what the word manifest destiny means? What does the word manifest destiny mean? Yes?
It's the thought that moving westward in America was people's right/destiny.
And who gave them the right and the destiny? God, exactly. So what you need to star on this, if you will highlight John O. Sullivan, anytime you hear the word John O. Sullivan, that is automatically a manifest destiny term. And then, if you will highlight in the second bullet, expansion of white Americans, highlight inevitable, and highlight ordained by God. Basically, God has designated Americans to move west. And what's going to happen is because of this, and this, by the way, relates to two terms that we've also talked about previously in colonization, having to do with Christianity and the duty of God. Anybody remember those two terms? There's two of them. Christian duty is one. Come on, guys, don't be my only class that doesn't get it. Good job. City upon a hill. Okay, if you didn't know that, you should probably be reviewing for the AP exam on a regular basis. Okay? Because that's a really important term. So, with this, basically it's going to say that we need to move west. The cause of this, or what we're going to do because of this, if you will put a 1 next to Christianity, is we're going to spread Christianity. And then a 2 next to democracy. So, through our expansion westward, we are going to move west while also spreading Christianity and democracy. Now, in terms of like the positives and negatives of this, okay, if you will, on this one of pros, if you will star the first bullet, that's why we do this and why it's a benefit. And then if you will highlight that this is going to be the Democrats, this is Andrew Jackson. Think Trail of Tears. Why would he have the Trail of Tears? Expansionism, moving westward, pro, manifest destiny. And then if you will highlight the Whigs under the cons, is they disagree with manifest destiny and they believe that it should go away. Now, our next example is going to be about Texas, which it downloaded really weird, so I apologize that it looks kind of strange. But we're going to talk about Texas and its impact. You okay? I can tell that. You also have a Hershey's wrapper stuck in your cast. Okay. All right, so try to stay awake, though, because this is about 25% of your quiz next class. Okay? So, with the Texas Revolution, if you want to write next to Texas Revolution, not the Mexican-American War. If you've ever been to Texas or have lived in Texas, you will know that Texas really, really likes Texas. Okay? Now, why I say that is because there are actually, like when they make textbooks, they have 3 different types of textbooks. They have the national one, which is the one you guys have. They have the Californian one, and that's because California has several laws that say that they have to include a lot more stuff in their curriculum that would be allowed in most other states. And then you have Texas. And the reason why is because about 1/3 of the Texas textbook is about Texas. Okay? Texas is very proud of their history. They take about 2 years of Texas history in the state of Texas as their core curriculum. What I will tell you is if you go down south and you say that the Alamo was part of the Mexican-American War, they will laugh you out of the state.
Do you want me to replace the tone and cartridge?
If you want. I just hadn't had a chance yet.
Is it the black and white one or the color one?
The black and white one.
Wait, I thought we just replaced that.
I don't know. It says it's out of ink. Okay. Maybe I'll be able to get you your printed notes. We will see. So with the Texas Revolution, things that you need to highlight here is you need to highlight slave. We'll talk about that in a moment. And if you will highlight Protestant versus Spanish Catholics, we'll talk about that in a second too. So what's going to happen is during the Texas Revolution, we have all this new land. In this new land, we have this border along the Red River, which is going to be the border of Texas. Now, with all of our manifest destiny and with all of us moving westward, when we get to this river and this border with Mexico, what do you think people are going to do? Cross it. It's God-given right to move west. Therefore, we're going to move west into New Spain, which is owned by what country? Spain. It is not a trick question. It is owned by Spain. Okay? You look confused. New Spain is owned by Spain. Okay. Now, in Texas, there's a bunch of missions. Remember, this is going to be a very Catholic society. This does come into conflict occasionally with the Protestant Texans coming in as the Americans. Now, what's going to happen is that this guy named Stephen Austin, he happens to have a city named after him. Anybody know what city it is? Austin, Texas. Not Stephen, Texas. Austin, Texas. Now, Stephen Austin asked for what is, and we only have 15 minutes, so I have to kind of hurry. He asked for what is called an impresario from the Spanish government. Basically, the impresario is going to give him a plot of land, which he's going to call the Austin Colony. And he is going to begin to grow this colony in Austin, Texas. Now, the thing is, though...
I thought we had another one, but we don't. So I'll tell Brody to order one. It should be, they're usually about a week.
Okay. I'm sure it won't be a problem. Okay, so... man, that's a bummer. They're going to say this. A person may travel all day and day after day and find Americans only. What is his concern about what he's seeing in Texas as somebody who's a Spaniard?
There's too many Americans.
Too many Americans. The immigrants are coming in. We're having too many immigrants, and we need to stop this. It's going to be passed called the Law of April 7, 1830, and it's basically going to say several different new laws for Texas, but here's some interesting ones. For example, in Article 10, it says, each state shall most strictly enforce the colonization laws and prevent the further introduction of slaves. What does that mean Texas is going to ban? Slavery. So who's going to be angry about this? The South, who mostly are going into Texas to have slaves. Okay? Then the other thing is it says, immigrants from nations bordering on this republic shall settle in the states or territory adjacent to their own nation. What is that now banning? Immigration. Now you have immigration that's banned. So you can't move there, you can't have slaves there, and now we're going to have conflict. Stephen Austin says this, war is our only recourse. Yes?
Was that a United States law? Or
that was a Mexican law.
Oh, okay.
Spanish law. War is our only recourse. Because remember, we go into another country, so we're in another country at this time that we just say is ours. And so they are going to fight a place called the
Alamo.
The Alamo. Now, with the Alamo, here's basically what happens. A bunch of Texans have been fighting a bunch of Mexicans, as well as in the division of Mexico that's part of Spain. And they're going to be fighting them, and all of these people, about 180, are going to go to the Alamo. Yes?
On the test, would it say New Spain or Mexico?
They will say New Spain, but they will refer to them as Mexicans in the Mexican-American War. Interchangeable. Okay? Now, they're going to hide out at the Alamo, and at the Alamo, we're going to have some very famous people. William Travis, if you go down into Texas, is probably one of the most famous figures in Texas history. Davy Crockett we'll talk about in just a second, and Jim Bowie we'll talk about in a second more. What's going to happen is surrounding these 180 men, women, and children is going to be Santa Anna and his 20,000 troops of Mexican soldiers. Who is going to win this battle?
The Americans.
We like to think the Americans. But Santa Anna, in approximately 1 hour, everybody in the Alamo is dead except one person, which is going to be Davy Crockett. Now, allegedly, they offered Davy Crockett his life if he were to go back to the United States and say to stop going into Texas. He refuses. Allegedly, he said the following as he was about to die, "I'm warning you boys, I am a screamer." They fixed bayonets and then stabbed him with 10 bayonets to kill him. Now, one thing to note, though, Everybody died at the Alamo. As much as some people like to say in their textbooks that they didn't die, all of them did die. No Mexican, as in anybody in the Mexican army, has ever said this happened. And yet, it is in legends and is in stories about this happening. Everybody died. We have no idea if this is true. Another example is you have a guy named Jim Bowie. Jim Bowie had a gun. He felt like this was not successful against Santa Anna's troops, so instead he got out this thing, which was called a
Bowie knife.
A knife is it's a Bowie knife. Good. So he gets this Bowie knife, which is named after him nowadays. He gets this Bowie knife and allegedly kills 100 of Santa Anna's men with his knife. Now, again, let's just remind ourselves, everybody died. There were no survivors to tell the true stories. In fact, it's actually alleged by Santa Anna's troops that he was actually one of the very first people to die because he was sick in bed. Okay? So, regardless though, Jim Bowie becomes famous in American history and actually ends up causing him to become known in comic books and in movies. And they actually have a comic strip that's going to go until 1966 and very famous. Emily Brown. You don't leave till after class is over though. Yep. Now, following this though, because again, this gets made into legend. Following this, there's going to be this thing called Goliath, which we do know is a true story. What happens at Goliath is, in response, Santa Anna is going to be angry after the Alamo. He goes and to where we have about 500 Texan prisoners of war. He surrounds them with his troops and kills them all. This angers the Americans and feels like they need to go to war. Now, the Texas Revolution is going to kind of end when this guy named Sam Houston, who also has something named after him called Houston, Texas, not Sam, Texas. Okay. You're really close, though, every time. So Houston is going to battle at this, and it's going to end the Texas Revolution. If you want to put next to the Texas Revolution the dates, it's approximately 1830 to 35. Approximately, depends on who you ask. But this is now going to end. Now, Texas becomes an independent nation following this. Now, I just want to note, they called themselves an independent nation. And again, don't tell this to a Texan. They were not an independent nation. They were still owned by Spain. Okay? But they're going to declare themselves an independent nation. About 3 years later, they do become it because Spain is going to give them away. They become an independent nation. If you've ever heard of the Lone Star State, the reason they're called the Lone Star State is because they are the independent nation. They are independent until they can't really succeed as a state, and then the United States is going to buy them and become the United States. Now, this brings us to a couple of presidents. The first one's going to be Martin Van Buren. Thing you need to know about Martin Van Buren is you don't really need to know a lot about Martin Van Buren. Okay? Martin Van Buren, he really didn't do anything that's going to be on the AP exam. I mean, knock on wood, because of course there's going to be some stimulus set or DBQ on Martin Van Buren. But what you could know about him is, if you want to highlight committed to keeping Jackson's beliefs, he basically just continued on with what was Andrew Jackson. Following Martin Van Buren's presidency, this guy is going to become the president, William Henry Harrison. But unfortunately, what happens to William Henry Harrison? He dies after his inaugural address. And because of this guy is going to come into play, named John Tyler. And John Tyler is a hoot. The reason why is because he was a Whig. He gets elected as a Whig, and then guess what? He was actually a Democrat. He was besties with Andrew Jackson. So imagine if Donald Trump got elected as the president, and on his very first day in his inaugural address, he says, JK, I'm a Democrat and I love Hillary Clinton. Do you guys see why some people might be angry at who they voted for? So, what happens with John Tyler? Things that happened. Basically, if you want to star the first bullet, that's going to be the most popular one you're going to hear from him. Basically, what happened is he's going to veto approximately 98% of the bills that get passed in the United States. Almost no bills get passed. His entire cabinet resigns, except for one, which was like his brother or something. Kicked out of his own party. He was literally, imagine being kicked out of your own party. But the one thing he did do, if you will highlight the last bullet, is he is going to add Texas as a state through what is known as annexation. Now, let me explain what annexation means. Annexation, we say Texas is a state. We don't mean that Texas was made a state from us buying it from somebody. Annexation literally means that we go and tell everybody in the world, we sign a paper that says this state is now ours. There's no money exchanged. There's no permission asked. This state is ours. Imagine if Donald Trump announced tomorrow that we have acquired Canada. Okay? That's basically what this did. We basically told Mexico, Texas is now ours. And we made it a state. Okay? We do the same thing multiple times with other ones. In particular, the bloodiest is going to be in Hawaii. Okay? Now, other fun facts about him. Number one, after he served as the U.S. president, he actually joined the Confederacy. When the Civil War broke out, he actually joins the Confederate government and then dies shortly after. Other fun fact is he still has 2 living grandchildren. Basically, when he was like 70 years old, he married a 20-year-old and had 2 kids. And they live in New York. One of them is 98, and then one of them is, well, the kids has another kid. They have a 98-year-old and a 96-year-old grandson that still exists. And he was born in 1790, so shoot for the stars in terms of posterity. Okay? Now, this brings us to James K. Polk. And James K. Polk is a starred person. He is very important. And you will want to highlight Western expansion. Basically, you need to know that he is going to be the guy that's going to move west. Now, Polk, when he is running for the presidency, he runs on this platform. He says, we're going to expand the United States as much as physically possible. He actually has this little key quote that says 5440 or fight. Basically what that means is he's going to say that we're going to extend the northern border or we're going to fight Canada for it. Now, in terms of... did that work? It actually does work, but we're not going to get there today. Okay, so this brings us to the Mexican-American War. Okay, now what's going to happen is Polk gets elected as the president, and he wants to expand westward. Now what's going to happen is President Polk has his bestie, Zachary Taylor, who looks super old. He was actually called Old Rough and Ready. Okay, is that he is going to be his general. He sends his general to the border of the Rio Grande River, which you might want to write down, the Rio Grande River, under the Mexican-American War. Now, he is going to send his troops to the Rio Grande River, and he's basically told that as soon as the Mexicans shoot, you shoot back and we'll begin a war. Zachary Taylor's there for a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, the Mexican army begins shooting across the Rio Grande River, kills several of Zachary Taylor's troops. He then says, we have now begun this war. He fights back, and the Mexican-American War begins. Except here's the problem. That never happened.
What?
No shots were ever fired from the Mexican side. Zachary Taylor allegedly heard something that he said was a shot, which is more than likely made up. He told his troops that the Mexicans are now shooting at us, and we shot back, as in we shot first. Okay? President Polk, however, goes to Congress and says, Mexico has invaded our territory and shed American blood upon the American soil. War exists by the acts of Mexico herself. Remind ourselves that, remember, Texas, we made a state without asking anybody permission. Okay? So we're going to begin into this Mexican-American War. And then this guy comes along. President Polk is deeply conscious of being in the wrong, that he ordered General Taylor into the midst of a peaceful Mexican settlement, purposely to bring on the war. Anybody know who this is?
Looks like Bill Nye the Science
It's not Bill Nye the Science Guy, but so close. It is
Bill Nye.
Abraham Lincoln. So this is... Okay, listen. Bill Nye cannot time travel as far as we know. So, Abraham Lincoln, though... Guys, I've got like 8 minutes left, and we're barely going to make it. Abraham Lincoln at this point is going to be a very young representative in the United States Congress, around 23 years old, if I remember correctly at this point. And this is going to be one of the first things he says that actually makes a big deal. So what's going to happen is that basically Texas is going to be fought and it is going to be won. Then we go over to California. Now on the back, you notice that you guys made the California flag. Now this right here is a golden bear. The reason the golden bear is on is it's actually an extinct bear in California. So they put that onto their flag. But then you have this thing up here, which is kind of like this weird star. Why would they have a star? Well, here's... What? Well, we're getting there. Okay? So here's basically what happens. California begins a massive revolt against this Mexican army. In 24 hours, they are able to capture the general of the Mexican army, and then the general of the Mexican army then relinquishes and gives up California as a state. Okay? This is called the Bear Flag Revolt, because at the end, they raised the flag with the bear, and in remembrance of Texas independence, they put a star on their flag in remembrance of the independence, because they're now an independent state. California is only an independent country for about 6 months, and then they get bought by the United States. So what's going to happen next? Well, you see, President Polk, who also looks like a super, super old guy, okay? President Polk is going to assign Nicholas Trist to end this war. Now, here's the problem that Nicholas Trist doesn't realize. Nicholas Trist wants peace. He doesn't want just temporary peace. He wants to never have to fight a war again with Mexico. This means creating peaceful terms. Polk, on the other hand, wanted every part of Mexico. He actually wanted New Spain all the way down to Panama. So imagine if the United States owned all of Central America, and he wanted it for free. Nicholas Trist, on the other hand, is going to say, that's not fair. We need to make sure that we prevent another war. And he is going to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which you need to star. This is going to end the U.S. war with Mexico. And in return of ending this war, the United States is only going to take about 1/5 of all the land that Polk wanted. He actually pays Mexico $15 million to do this, and he is going to gain this part of the United States. Now, unfortunately, though, is that James K. Polk is really mad, because he knows that Trist has totally just backstabbed him. At least that's what he thinks. He then sends out an arrest warrant for Nicholas Trist, who then is going to try to escape for several months. He eventually gets arrested and is put into jail for almost the rest of his life for not taking the rest of Mexico like Polk wanted. Now, what's going to happen next, and this is the last thing, so just stay with me for just a second, is that basically what's going to occur is that Franklin Pierce, who's the next president, he is going to have Gadsden over here complete what is known as the Gadsden Purchase. This is because they wanted to create a transcontinental railroad to get across the United States. The land was perfect at that location. And so what they're going to do is, first off, the Mexican Cession, by the way, is the land purchased from Mexico. You can go ahead and highlight that. So if you ever see the word Mexican Cession, this is going to be land purchased from Mexico. You can thank your state, because your state came from the Mexican Cession. And then you get to the Gadsden Purchase, and this is going to be another starred term. The Gadsden Purchase is going to be the final acquisition of land in the continental United States. And its acquisition of land is finally going to end our continental United States and make it nice and big. That part is right down here. The only two parts that we are going to acquire in terms of states are going to be Hawaii and Alaska, and a bunch of other countries which we will talk about in period 7. Okay? So, things that you need to do at this point. At Free Soil Party, I would go ahead and put a line there so you know what you need to study for next time's quiz and for next time's quiz. We have about 7 minutes left of lecture. We'll do that after the quiz, but it will not be on the quiz. Okay? So, we have about 2-3 minutes left in class. Yeah, Free Soil Party. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop there.